Holy Gospel according to St. John, the 15th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus said, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine grower. He removes every branch in me that bears no fruit. Every branch that bears fruit he prunes to make it bear more fruit. You have already been cleansed by the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me as I abide in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit, because apart from me you can do nothing. Whoever does not abide in me is thrown away like a branch and withers. Such branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask for whatever you wish and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Dear friends, grace and peace from God our Father and our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen. Many of you know that my day job involves working with the Southeastern Iowa Synod, and one of my responsibilities is to lift up things like the World Hunger Appeal, and today especially the work of Lutheran World Relief and the ELCA Disaster Relief Fund. I'm only going to mention this briefly at the beginning because it has something to do, I think, with the text today about abiding and bearing fruit. Many of you know, as we heard in the announcements, that Nepal was struck by a devastating earthquake this past week. I know that ELCA Lutherans are already there through these organizations, and we will be among the last to leave when that recovery work is done. And the work that we do is sponsored and is financed by contributions that come from congregations such as ours. So I urge you to be generous in supporting this important work. Every cent that we give to this disaster relief will be used to do that disaster response there in Nepal. And that's possible because the mission support that we send and congregations like us send provides for all the infrastructure and all of the other kinds of work that needs to surround that. And so we are fortunate that we are confident that the money we give will go directly to do that important work on behalf of the church and on behalf of Jesus. The fact that we're the first in and oftentimes the last out is really a way that we abide and the way that we bear fruit. You know, that word abide is kind of an old-fashioned word. We hear it in our text for today several times. It's a word that we find also in our hymnals, probably more often than we hear it in our daily conversations. Highway motel signs read something like, "Stay here," not "abide with us tonight." Baseball announcers don't sum up an inning by saying, "No runs, no hits, no runners abiding on base." We don't abide with Grandpa and Grandma for the weekend. The babysitter doesn't abide with the kids. In many ways, it's a word that seems to belong to another time or another place. But there are other reasons why the word is not used by us all that frequently. Because to abide has to do with persevering, with continuing, lasting, staying with it. It's really a commitment word. It's not a word that you use for quick stops or one-night stands or relationships of convenience. And so no wonder that term is rare. What it means, what it signifies is rare, especially in times such as ours. The kind of commitment which abiding requires is not all that fashionable, and in many ways it scares many people off. We have seen all too well the price which is being paid for losing this word and losing its significance in our lives. The absence of abiding really diminishes us. Friendships are broken, and so often are treaties between nations. Confirmation vows and marriage covenants are broken sometimes for what may seem to be little more than reasons of convenience. God alone knows the full toll of grief and dysfunction that is set in motion by our failure to abide in human community, in Christian congregations, in communities, and in families. We know the awful price which is paid when we fail to abide and when others fail to abide with us. But one of the promises and the words of good news that we find in our gospel lesson for this morning, as Jesus speaks about himself as the vine, is that Jesus promises and says that he abides with us. This is more than a relationship of convenience. It's more than a short-term connection. Jesus abides with us, nurturing us, caring for us, feeding us with all the attention and more of the keeper of a fine vineyard, knowing what we need to bear good fruit and what it takes for us to remain faithful. Jesus abides with us. And then he commands us, one of those friendly commands like eat your chocolate cake, he commands us to abide in him. Abiding, however, seems to be something we are more comfortable asking God to do for us and with us than we are hearing Christ invite or even command us to do with him. Abiding seems to be beyond our capabilities, maybe sometimes even beyond our desires. And yet, as the one who is the true vine, Jesus says, "Abide in me as I abide in you." His invitation to us to abide in him comes as that response to his grace, his gift, his promise, his commitment to abide with us. It's the ongoing Easter miracle that though we did our best to cut off the vine and to kill it, God raised him up. And now this same Jesus, this true vine, abides, lasts, endures, continues, hangs in there with us and holds on to us and in us. He does so despite all of our shallow commitments, our half-empty promises, our tendencies to go packing when the notion strikes us. He abides with us. And so we keep singing and we keep praying, "Abide with me," knowing that our only hope is his presence in our lives and knowing that our flawed staying with him won't stop his abiding with us. Abide in me, Jesus says. Live in me as I live in you. I am the vine, you are the branches. Abide in me as I abide in you. My friends, it is both possible and it is desirable. Now this sounds all very nice, very settled, very secure, in many ways very comfortable. And we could use some security these days as life presents us with more than its share of insecurities and difficulties. Abide in me, it sounds like a good, safe way of following Jesus. And yet, abiding, staying connected to this one who abides with and remains connected to us, is not without its risks and its dangers. We take comfort, as indeed we should, in knowing that Jesus is the vine and that we are his well-attached branches. But then in building on that image, Jesus says, he removes every branch in me that bears no fruit. And then there is more. Every branch that bears fruit, he prunes to make it bear more fruit. Now, I suppose we would expect dead branches and branches which only take up space and do little more than drain the rest of the vine of what it needs to provide the other branches for fruit. We expect those things to be removed. We often hear talk about needing to get rid of the dead wood. And when we ourselves join in such conversations, we are obviously talking about someone other than ourselves, or something in or about someone else which surely does not reside in us. But this pruning business, pruning branches which already bear fruit, my hunch is that most of us would probably want to put ourselves in that category of fruit-bearing branches. The notion of pruning, of being cut back, is not very appealing. That's part of the text that causes probably more anxiety than security, more concern than comfort. We like the notion of getting rid of the dead wood or of those who do not contribute to the common good. But Jesus says, I am the vine, you are the branches, abide in me, and I will prune you back so that you will need less for yourself and you can therefore bear more fruit for others. Somehow most of us don't seem eager to stand in line for that. At least not until we realize that our very reason for being is to bear fruit, to pass on to others the very gifts from God which flow through us. As the vine, Christ gives us and allows us to keep for ourselves only enough to produce abundant fruit for others. When I was about 13, 14, somewhere in there, we moved to a different farm, one on which the previous owners had planted an absolutely huge strawberry patch. I remember the first spring that we were there, walking down by that strawberry patch with my dad and looking at that patch lush with vines and saying out loud to my father, look at that. I can already taste Mom's strawberry shortcake. And Dad grunted, as he often did when he knew something that I didn't. And he said, yeah, look at that. It's all vines. The berries we get out of that won't amount to a hill of beans. And he was right. And so right then and there, I was assigned one of my jobs for that summer, namely to spade through that patch, to prune it, as it were, creating narrow rows of plants so that the vines would put less into themselves and more into their fruit, those luscious strawberries. If there was no pruning, there would be no fruit. Now, I'm not prepared this morning to suggest the ways that God may prune us in order that we may bear more fruit. My sense is that we cannot predict or anticipate that happening. Often we can only recognize it as we look back on it in hindsight. Sometimes the ways we are pruned may be too painful and distressing at the time to recognize it as such. But the question which the text addresses, therefore, is not so much speculation about the ways we are or are going to be pruned, but rather the firm affirmation about why we are disciples, why we are connected to the vine in the first place. And the answer to that is clear. We exist as God's people, as disciples of Jesus Christ, to bear good fruit, the fruit of love and service to be shared with and given to our neighbors. And so we ask ourselves, in the light of this text, why am I connected to the vine? And why is it important for Christ to say to me, abide in me as I abide in you?